Okay, I want to just do a quick intro to using this tool. We do find sometimes that people are confused about the tool. They might think it's heavy or it's too powerful, and that all comes from a lack of understanding about how to use the tool. So I just want to give you some ideas about that, and you do need to spend a little bit of time with it. One thing is, this is not a massage tool, so it's not intended for the same purpose as a very light, little, quiet massage tool. For one thing, those tools tend to have firm heads. They often have hard plastic heads. We intentionally designed this tool to do trigger point therapy. And for that reason, we specifically created the silicone heads, which are very compressible. So this tool has a longer stroke, so it goes back and forth in a longer stroke than a typical massage tool, which tends to be a very light vibration that you just kind of run over muscles, and it's relaxing. This is for a different purpose. It's for doing trigger point therapy. Now, you can use it in a more general way, but if you expect it to be just like your little massage tool, it's not going to be. So just encouraging you to kind of get to know it first and how to use it before you make a judgment about that. We love this tool. We use it extensively. We have practitioners that are 100 pounds, very small people, using it very happily. So it's really only, it's about 4 pounds or a little less, which isn't a lot. If you hold it out like that, it feels like a lot. So don't do that. That's not a good way to use the tool. So just with all forms of body mechanics, we tend to teach our body mechanics along a martial arts model. And if you keep things close to your core, you're always going to be better off. You don't want long arms, long levers, because that's going to stress your muscles. So if you're working on somebody, you always want to have the tool fairly close. If you can even rest your arm close in, and sometimes we'll even support with the other arm or use 2 hands. It's not heavy at all, So the purpose of the tool is so you can be, the heads are soft silicone, so you can be very specific. You can target specific muscle fibers, which you do need to do in trigger point therapy, and it has enough impact that it creates a lot of neurological distraction. So what we're not trying to do with this tool is break up fascia and mechanically hammer muscles so hard that they are going to then break up the trigger points. That's really not what happens. The vibration itself is what's most valuable, and we use it specifically in relationship to our the lessons that we teach in our membership. So the forms of trigger point therapy we do on each muscle. So generally, our treatment cycle involves working into short and then working into stretch. Now, when you're using the vibration in stretch, the muscle sarcomeres are already going to have a tendency to want to pull apart. When you bring the vibration in, it greatly aids that process. And what will normally happen in a muscle with trigger points, if you try to stretch it, you are going to stress those trigger points that are happening at the motor end plate zone of the muscle. And you may then cause the muscle to have its referral pattern, so the person is going to feel some pain. Well, when you add the vibration, that pain will cause the nervous system to shut down the stretch. The vibration interrupts that whole pattern. Neurological distraction, it's a great advantage in doing trigger point therapy. So generally, working under stretch is where you want to get to with the tool. And that we will cover more in our specific lessons. Right now, what I want to do is just show you some ways about working with the tool. But just recall, as you're doing this, it's for that specific end. Now, you can use it in a general way along muscles, that's fine. But even when you're doing that, if you're alongside the back, for example, you can prop your arm on your leg and kneel.
So I have very small hands and wrists, so the muscle liberator on first try might be pretty heavy for me. And for this reason, I am finding every way possible to brace and support this tool. One of the places that I will use kind of an opposite grip would be working on the pec region. So if I have Chuck's arm over me, I'm thinking about, you know, holding this large tool in front of me. How am I going to get, you know, this is not a lot of support. Luckily, I can have my elbow resting on him. And then I often will use my opposite hand to actually get an additional layer of support on muscles that I need to be working. So I might be working from this position. And again, my hand is at not the typical pistol grip, but I'm using my thumb to actually use the tool. And once I've had enough experience with this tool, I feel better actually being able to rest my arm on his torso and use it one-handed. Honestly, the longer I've used it, the more I've gotten used to it, and the more I know when my hand or my wrist is going to tire out if I'm not using the right position. So here I can then actually manipulate the shoulder with my opposite hand because I feel pretty supported by his torso right here. Sometimes even just having the tool close to my core is all that I really need. When I've got Chuck propped up like this and I'm using my leg to rotate his arm, I've got my arm pretty close to my body. And then I can relax the tool throughout his serratus. Infraspinatus is a great place for this in this position, teres major and minor. And it's really about keeping it close to me. It does not feel nearly as heavy as it might if I'm bringing my shoulder out in this direction. I'm not even using the tool and I can already feel its weight. Again, I'm looking for support in every single position that I'm in. So if I'm working the low and mid trap here, I'm going to have this tool rested against my leg. Sometimes, depending on the height of the client, I might be resting higher, so I will be propping the tool up onto my arm here. With Chuck, I can rest it lower and decide. I'm constantly questioning, where am I going to get the most support? So I've got my hand right here. This doesn't feel like quite as much supported as I would like, so I am actually going to come up and get some support from my thigh here. And then I've got my other arm that I can move his trap into a shortened position or a lengthened position because I've got enough support here. So the glutes tend to be one of the harder positions because you really need your opposite arm to be able to move the leg so you can get fibers moving underneath the compression, the percussion of the tool. But luckily these fibers, these muscles tend to be much denser, and so here is an area where you can really just allow the tool to relax onto the muscle instead of having to hold it and hover it over the muscle. So I can have Chuck's leg under my arm and be rotating it as I just allow the tool to rest into his glutes. And again, notice that my elbow is down. I never hold my tool up above me. My elbow is down next to my core, and then I'm just gonna relax the tool into the muscle. The calf or soleus and gastroc are an area where, you know, I might end up finding myself just holding this muscle out in front of me, this tool out in front of me. But one of the things that I like to do is just break up that weight. If this is not an area where I need this other arm, I am actually going to use this other arm to support me. So while notice I'm using my chest to bring him into a lengthened and shortened position, so then I have this other hand that I can use to support the tool. So I'm actually going to break up this weight, keep my elbows down by my side while I move his foot with my chest. That felt like nothing. One-handed, I would not be feeling the same way.
I'm always looking for a way to brace the Liberator on my body somehow to so I don't have to use as much of my own shoulder and arm strength to use it. Or even better than that is using it where I can actually just leave it on the mat. So that's an option too, and sometimes that works. A good example of that would be what we call the Daku Cow 2 position. So normally I'm doing a adductor magnus under stretch position here, and I would be using the Liberator on the adductor magnus. Now this muscle is under stretch, so I can kind of rest the machine on here a bit, but notice my arm is right next to my body. All right, so one of the key things is to, when you're using the tool, is when possible, keep it close to your body. And then I can bring the muscle in and out of stretch. So adductor magnus is going under stretch, and I can just let the machine rest there, and when possible, I have my arm against my own body. And if I have it out here, I can feel the stress in my shoulder already. This is, even if I'm not resting my arm on anything, I'm already giving myself more structure. Now, oftentimes when we're doing this position, what happens is the TfL is going into a shortened position, and sometimes it will contract on the short and it will block the adductor magnus stretch. This is a move that I often do. I want to get feedback on this muscle, so that will distract the muscle from contracting on the short, and then it will shorten more gracefully. One way I can do that is by, sometimes we put fingertip compression here, but if I want to use the Liberator, I can just get the feedback on the muscle with the Liberator and just rest it on the mat. And then I just use my thumb to control the trigger. So notice I start the machine first. I don't want him to feel that first punch of the percussion. I want to get it going first. Then I just bring it to the muscle, and I don't even have to be that specific. I rest it on the ground, and now I can shorten TfL, lengthen the adductor magnus, while getting that vibration distraction on the TfL. So here is another position I often use. I want to get his rectus femoris muscle under stretch, and with the Liberator on the rectus femoris muscle, I can use my body to bring him into stretch, so I can brace his knee here so his leg will stay in neutral, and as I bend his heel towards his sit bone, that's going to bring his rectus into stretch. Now, if I do that, see how his knee tends to come forward? That is bringing flexion here. That's going to take the rectus off stretch, so that's a bailout. I can block that with my knee and then bring him into stretch this way. This is very easy to do for me. And then I can use the Liberator on the rectus, and I'm going to let it just rest on the floor because I don't have to lift it. So when possible, I want to just leave it on the floor. And here's a good example of that. So we can even do this as a contract relax. So if you pull your knee forward into me and then also try to straighten your leg, take a deep inhale. And exhale, relax it. Once I feel him fully relaxed, then I take him into stretch with the Liberator. here's an example of sitting from above, and I want to get vibration on the high trap and the supraspinatus muscle as they're going into short. So I need to control his arm movement. So often, this is how I'll do it, is I hold him close to the elbow here, and then my elbow is resting on my own leg. So then he can just relax his arm, and because he'll feel that stability. If I was doing this with compression of, just thumb compression, I would stack my thumb, and this is how I would do it. But I could do the same type of thing with the vibration. Now I'm just going to raise up my left knee so I can bring the tool onto my own leg. So I don't have to hold this out into space. That would be a lot of work on my shoulder. I want to rest and have a point of contact for my arm, and that greatly reduces any stress in my own shoulder. And then it's very easy.